Good afternoon, everyone. For this final chat, we figured we'd just sit all around this one table and have a conversation. So hopefully, if the podium's in the way for you folks over there, you're more than invited to shuffle over this way. But to start things off, I guess I'll introduce myself. My name's Danny Robidoux. I'm the Executive Director of Eco West Canada. Eco West Canada is a national not-for-profit. We're based out of Winnipeg in Manitoba. And we work primarily with municipalities on helping them identify and adopt clean and green technologies. Mostly small municipalities. We say 20,000 in population and below is kind of our target. But to be truthful, and in the prairies, we typically work with communities of 5,000 people and less. So there's, I know from my experience when we're looking at energy systems and whatnot with communities, there's a lot of interest, but it's how do we actually get to do that? And I'm really curious about I'm really happy about being able to moderate this session on Indigenous experiences in community energy, because I think there may be some similarities between the experiences around the table here and what I see personally with a lot of the communities that we work with. And I'm looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have with Garrett and Leighton. I was told, though, before getting started, that we also have to thank the Accelerating Communities Energy Transition for sponsoring the last coffee break, and so thank you very much for that. So before getting into like the heavy duty questions, I figured maybe kind of situating ourselves with what the projects are that both Garrett and Leighton are involved in, so that then we can start having a conversation about how they're doing, how they got there, what the challenges were, and what's the future look like. So Garrett, I'll hand it over to you if you don't mind, and just tell the folks a little bit about what it is that you're working on, and what's your and how, what's the project that you're working on?
First of all, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Aga Gothlandai, the goddess Lakigawai, Haida Nation. Translation, spirit dancer, Raven Wolf Clan. English name is Garrett Russ. I currently reside in Skidegate, and I am working as their climate action coordinator, looking after all the green energy initiatives for the south end of the island. I do have a partner up in the north end located in Masset that does the north end. We work together along with another energy corporation that works with the Council of Haida Nation. So if you look up on the map, just across from Sandspit on the Graham Island side is located, and that will show Skidegate. I'm on the south end. Old Masset is just by the new town of Masset, and they operate two separate grids. So we work independently, but together to take our reliance off of diesel. We do have an initiative put forward by the Council of Haida Nation to reduce our diesel consumption. And currently, as of 2021, when our last numbers came out for BC Hydro, we burn through 10 million liters a year, accounting for 50% of greenhouse gas emissions for the grid for BC and 5% of Canada's. So the initiatives that we're pushing forward to cut that down is a major impact for everyone throughout Canada.
Wow. That's a lot of GHG emissions. I was not expecting that. That's late.
Yeah, just under 5,000 residents.
That's a significant amount of energy consumed through fossil fuels and emissions being
and just
put
note
out.
That's only for the grid. That's not transportation methods or anything to get there.
Wow. So definitely lots of challenges then.
Yes.
Yeah. And Leighton, how about yourself?
Yeah. My name is Leighton Gall. It's nice to meet you all. I am a research fellow at the Cascade Institute, specialized in drilling in the ultra deep geothermal program, and I'm also the Indigenous engagement lead. And from Métis Nation, I live here in the area, originally from Saskatchewan. And then I guess for those of you that speak Michif, Leighton, de Shinakashun, ni mieux taïn and the Kishkataan, ni le fellow recherche et Ewin. Predominantly over at Cascade Institute, been there for about a year and a half, and then researching how to go ultra deep. So usually around 5,000 or meters underneath us today, there's enough heat to generate electricity through organic Rankine cycle turbines. And that's what our specialization is, drill on down there and decarbonize pretty much any community. But I have a little more specialization in remote and micro-sized organic Rankine cycle turbines, and then the directional drilling specialization required to go after those heat resources. So, and then a little more recently, now my background here is also I have a master's in global management, and I was over in Leslie's program there in science and policy of climate change. And so merging business and also learning about how to take environmental science and put them together, along with Indigenous background. Now work over on solar projects and studying those and analyzing the community energy purchase agreements and seeing why they're successful and how to replicate them across the province, and work quite a bit at a national level as well. So in the Arctic and on the East Coast.
So I guess for the two of you, I'm curious what led you to this? Was it a personal kind of calling? Was it personal interest? What led you down this path so far?
Yeah, I mean, oh, sure. It was pretty simple. It was a matter of just being in Saskatchewan and needing a job. And so, yeah. And so I started out in the oil and gas sector down there as a surveyor, and then moved over into drilling. And then years after that, they were shipping me off to Nicaragua to go drill geothermal in the active volcanoes over there, and then Japan to go do those volcanic geothermal resources, and then picking up experience along the way. And then that kind of led me out of thinking that there's an industry beyond oil and gas, which led me back here to Roads to upgrade business education.
Interesting. And yourself, Garrett?
For myself, what led me into this is about 13 years ago, I started working with a company that dealt with Volvo construction, which was a major part in the LNG pipeline that was put in through the north of BC here. We got to manage all the logistical stuff for the construction equipment from Houston all the way through the west coast to Kitimat. I got to see what the impacts were that were being created by industries in the oil and gas. I also got to benefit from it, but I decided to move back to Haida Gwaii on personal issues that were coming up. And I decided to get into the green energy sector. With my background, I started with the technical side as just a technical worker for the clean energy. And then last year, I took over the position as a climate action coordinator.
So for your projects, as you're working on developing them, we've heard that we're very much focused on community energy cooperatives. What is the kind of the community involvement behind the work that you're doing, and how does that help move things forward for you folks?
Currently, this past year, we have done a few community engagement sessions. We do have a society that's called Sweelaweed Society. They operate on island with the energy initiatives, and they hold an annual symposium that's put on. And then each coordinator, so the north and south, will put on a couple functions a year if given the time. And those engagements, that tell the people in the villages of what's going on and getting their feedback on issues that are coming up, whether it be environmental or dealing with the financial side with the policies and that, to bring light to it and make them understand that we're here for the better of everyone. Of course, it's a little transition time for people, but it takes a little bit of information and coordinating these events so that both power supply, contractors, and people of the community can all be in one room and start asking those questions and get answers that evening.
Great. And yourself, Leighton, in terms of the initiatives that you're working on, any kind of community need or
There's
support?
quite the range. There's the people that absolutely love us because they don't have the answers, and a lot of times they can have a non-Indigenous consulting firm in the area, and so they don't entirely know whether what they're being told is accurate or valued in the same way that Indigenous people value a project, because there's quite a bit of a difference between what both entities want there. On the Western side, you usually have a lot of measurements and KPIs, and then on the Indigenous side, you have a lot of relationships with people, the environment that's around there, and so they're valuing that quite a bit and wondering what the differences are between them. And then, there's also the universal language of finance. So they are wondering whether the projections are correct. And then there's the other ones there that just don't want you there at all. And yeah, and so they can, you'll have it where, I've gone into communities and known everybody forever, and then come in and get introduced as a researcher, and then all of a sudden they don't like you. And we've known each other for a long time, and just that title is enough for them to just shut it down and be, then have to work on that relationship all over again.
It's I find that climate change and these types of issues are typically quite divisive in general. So,
Yes.
but I'm curious, how do you marry the two then in terms of the Western approach and the more First Nations approach, and how do you move the yardsticks forward to try to try to make your projects kind of gain some traction?
Yeah. Usually I take whatever we're using for a metric on project timelines here in the Western side and double it, because you're going to need that time to incubate the relationship with everybody around there. And because you're working on a relationality, you're working on a trust-based system. So from there, you also have to understand the community organization on where elder input fits in and how they value youth capacity building and where that intergenerational approach comes from. Because the people that are here today value the people that came before them and the people that still aren't here yet. And so once you've acknowledged their responsibility to their environment and the area that they're inhabiting and the elements of the people behind them, then you can start to get into the finance part. And so usually with a lot of, there's a lot of smart First Nations, Métis, Inuit economic development professionals out there, and they will then at that point get back to the finance and economics of the project, and they will be asking you what's the MPV and IRR, because if these things aren't economic and profitable and they won't work for non-Indigenous projects, they're not going to work here either. It's not magic that it's just situated around here and we're going to have problems. So then we'll get into the explanation of that.
How about yourself, Garrett? Is there an approach that that marries Western and First Nations work with the work that you're doing, or how do you bridge those gaps?
It's going to be very interesting for us in the coming future right now, dealing with those gaps as our Haida title, if anyone has any idea about it, that is the province is pulling back from monitoring and taking control of Haida Gwaii and giving it back so that we can manage it. this leads to issues of whether provincial or federal will come into play when we start these bigger solar and possibly wind or tidal projects, as to which regulations are we going to be following and how is it going to change. And moving forward with those, we don't seem to have as many issues as I stated with the numbers, with those numbers that we produce and what's going on. Working and moving forward together as a group instead of individually is not a question for us. I can see a few people along the coast that are having issues that I talk with and coordinate with. But those issues for us are virtually none, other than usually BC Hydro's policies on how much we can create.
And in terms of in developing your initiatives, what kinds of partnerships, or how do partnerships come into play? Do they come into play?
Right now, we're working on a partnership with Atlantic Power, which operates a hydro dam located in Mitchell Inlet, which is out of the Moresby Lake watershed. We just put in an application to put in a turbine to upgrade that station. And that will be one of the first major keys to putting us together with corporations to see if we can do this by ourselves and get out of BC Hydro's grip on the island with running diesel all the time.
And Leighton, with yourself, in terms of partnerships to move your initiatives forward, what do those look like? How have you been able to leverage them?
Yeah, we've at Cascade Institute, we're predominantly an academic research group. And so we've been networking across quite a few other university institutes across the country that have their own internal geothermal specialists in there, and whether it be geologists or your engineers, such, and then also merging up with trade association groups that all have, they all have their buy-in interest to get new projects off the ground rolling. To date in Canada, there's not a lot of Indigenous geothermal. However, there is Tutica that is 100% Indigenous owned, but they would be the one standalone. For some of the other projects, partnering up, we're kind of also at the spot where at what point does it make sense to bring in Indigenous money and funds and investment into technologies? Subsurface is somewhat uncertain. So though, we can't bank on them entirely like we can with solar. Like we can see solar radiance mapping and kind of bank within a degree of certainty what kind of economic outcome we're going to have. And instead, when we go subsurface, we can break things off while drilling and have cost overruns. And so it's not an entirely set science. And so sometimes it makes sense to sit back for a little bit and then move government money in to de-risk that technology. And then later on, you can make concrete investments. And hopefully it runs a lot like how shale oil and gas happens. And we can, in the future, just take a drilling rig and 3D print power plants subsurface with that same efficiency.
Well, we can be very fluid, so I'm okay if you want to pose questions if we want to take questions from the crowd right away.
On the geothermal side of things, is there any national, sufficient mapping of the potential for geothermal that is enough that you can actually go for it, so to say?
Yeah, our geologists and geophysicists over at Royal Roads University are actually just about to kick off that heat mapping study along with the Geologic Survey of Canada. Down in the US, they mapped out all of their resources. Then we ended up just stopping short of the border. And then now Cascade is picking up where they left off and didn't pick up and continue with the work. And so, yeah, that's an active project that we have on our books that is going to be going on over the next year, probably two. Yes. Yeah, 100%. Whatever we do at Cascade Institute, we publish open source. And so you'll be able to see all of that. There's some zones that we already have mapped out. We have good data points on that from drilling in oil and gas. So from the measurement well drilling tools, you can see from that unit and what the heat gradient is in certain areas. So we can tell where would it be? In Grand Prairie, south of there, in Alberta, and some places in the foothills in the mountains. Not everywhere is appropriate to drill. There's a total addressable market because they're not close to roads or they just don't have the power lines going by it. So not everything is feasible. Sometimes we like to push out the big numbers at theoretical maximums, and then how big the gigawatts are and then we fall back to the what reality is. Yes, but it's definitely fun to dream.
Are there any other questions from the crowd, or we're good for now? Oh,
You mentioned 3D printing power plant subsurface. Can you just expand upon how you're imagining that could work?
Yeah. So what's coming up in the future is you will be able to take the oil and gas rigs and program in the subsurface coordinates into them. We're already at a spot where take it a building like this where we have screens up on the wall and we're all behind laptops. We're actually able to pilot those drilling rigs out in the field right now by our laptops if we had a satellite system. And so from here, I'd be able to push a button, program everything, and it'll pick up the drill with the guys that are in the field. They just lock it off, let me take a hold of it in town and then go to drilling automatically and then put it into the robot. So in the future, those drills will pick up their own pipe, make their own connections, and then drill it. We just put in what the mapping is of where we want them to be underground, and they will literally 3D print that subsurface infrastructure. Yeah, it is pretty cool tech. Yeah.
So that just makes me think of some of the conversations we were having earlier in terms of how feasible most of this work is without any subsidies or public financing. So in terms of moving this work forward for both of you, what level of involvement do you see in terms of a need to kick things off in terms of what role would subsidies and grants be playing in all of this for you folks, and how about private financing as well? Kind of what's the financial makeup of how do we move the yardsticks forward?
For myself and my position, we rely heavily on grants. Obviously, we can utilize those to our best capabilities. Of course, there are some things those grants don't touch, in which we have to find money therefore in order to do some of the research stuff, as that seems to be some of the issues on our side. The money is there for us to do all of our projects once the research is done. So if we can get that rolling, it's usually easy for us to move forward. I know when we did our heat pump program 10 years ago, we utilized band funds, so it was out of pocket to buy everyone a heat pump, and we had access to everything out of their BC Hydro accounts. We could monitor that and move forward, but that was one of the biggest initiatives out of pocket, and we just used rebates after. But a majority was still done by out of pocket from our band council at that time. We do have budget and contingency within the funds for projects as they come up. Of course, we have to look for more, as being in a remote area off the West Coast where everything has to come in by barge or ferry. It is very expensive to utilize anything coming to the island. And that's where we tend to have struggles with finding our funds. We are looking into other options to see if we can get those moving forward and smoother in the future, as trying to get rid of that 10 million liters a year of diesel. Deadline's coming up. So over this next year or so, I'm going to start looking into other ways that we can set up any type of funds to come in and utilize those for what we need.
Would you?
I was just asking about subsidies and grants and what role those, because there were some comments around it'd be nice to be able to not have to rely on any of that and just have them be standalone, financially viable.
Yeah, I guess like it comes up to some of the what I always tell my team, like, and ask him the big question mark around geothermal is like, what's bankable? And in solar, you could predict that pretty regularly and go out there and buy your panels. But on the geothermal side, we have a lot of unknowns. We haven't gone to those depths before. We haven't gone to those pressures. Usually requires tools that have the same sophistication as if you were to fly a space mission over to Venus, because the heats are going to melt the alloys and desolder the boards, and the hard granitic rock that we're looking at drilling through in that basement where we are is going to scrub everything down. So we have to look at diamond impregnating all of our metallics and alloys, so we're not busting it. So like the answer on our side is we're going to destroy a lot of stuff and spend a lot of money doing it. So in Canada here, we are aiming to look at leveraging up $500 million to go and doing geothermal exploration and developing expertise and IP here in Canada. And that way we can either export it, or once you've got that, then you're energy independent off of fossil fuel systems. Because I do get quite a few questions from small island developing states. How are we going to get off of our 42.5 cent kilowatt hour? And what I always tell them is that you're probably looking at having to do geothermal in your area and at whatever cost that it is, because the two pathways that you have is either to not decarbonize, and you're going to go down a pathway where when we talk about, we're going to start running out of tier 1 shale oil and gas plays where it's super easy for us and cheap with the technology we have to go out there and pull oil and gas out of the ground. In about 20 years, 25 years, that runs out. And then you're going to see tier 2 come up. And then if you think that energy prices now are expensive, just wait till we're eking out yields to get that stuff. So sometimes it's a matter of climate change and we're changing the atmosphere. It might just come down to we run out of the stuff and easy to get things. And then for the other ones, what you've seen here is Russia had an earthquake recently. And then you have your tsunamis, and geothermal is also the best answer to that, because in some of the islands, they're saying that there's some sensitive areas for us that we don't want to go to. And once again, too, do you want them to be habitable and powered or not? And so at the same time, if you're going to put a nuclear plant, after Fukushima had its reactor meltdown, I was there soon after drilling in one of their national parks for geothermal. So when you have a natural disaster followed by a nuclear meltdown, you don't really get a choice. So they're probably not the safest bets to put out there in areas, these SMRs. They might be safe in a lot of other places. I know on the East Coast, what the First Nations Elizabeth was talking about, they would, if they could get 5 or 6 more of them, they would. But that's also their proximity to, having those things. But if you have a tidal wave come in and hit your stuff, or you have an earthquake and you irradiate everything in your area, it's uninhabitable. So you don't want that to happen. So literally you will be looking at having to take those grants and subsidies and figure out technology. And you can see already with the Trump administration down south, they've moved, they haven't repealed all of the green energy money that they had. They just moved it. So they took everything out of solar and wind, and they moved it all over to geothermal. Like that budget over in geothermal 4x'd overnight when they made their movements. So there's clean energy money out there. It's just what type. And so it's going to be expensive to bring it down its cost curve, but solar was also the same right now. So, and solar has predictable IRRs and payback periods. And so, I mean, sometimes we do get to a point of, deploying some of those projects. Do they need subsidies for them? I do work for the ICVCM in carbon markets and rewiring them. And one of the things that we won't issue carbon credits for is solar projects, because we know that they're profitable. So that doesn't meet our criteria for additionality, that a lot of these projects can stand on their own profit-wise. But when you start getting to smaller scale, what we've talked about, credits should be issued for those. And somehow we haven't come up with like a really good way to aggregate and comp money back to when you're doing your clean energy projects out there, and then getting you that margin where when you're saying, hey, we can only get 5%, that's where a carbon credit comes in to get you to a little bit higher, where we start meeting those investor hurdle rates. So as of right now, rewiring those money, we have a money market problem. We don't have really a technology problem. And so that's typically how I've gone about approaching a lot of how we get money and how we solve for doing more energy projects.
Interesting. Yeah, the carbon credits is always, it's something, it's kind of a black box out there that seems very appealing and interesting, but not many people know how to access it just for right now.
Yeah, it's one of what we've seen is like borrowing. A lot of these things start at the banker, because all of us are in here going, well, can we get the money? Where's the money? And usually it is at the level of the banker. And so if there's a financial incentive for them and you start playing around in their rules and their realities, then you start getting successful takeoffs. And this is what we've kind of seen in this Science and Policy of Climate Change program, is that there's not a lot of MBAs in there that have the ability to speak in terms of finance. And so, when we get to engineering and some of the environmental stuff, that, these things are self-evident to you, but if you can't speak in terms of finance, that person there doesn't speak much of any other language. They just want to know that you're hitting those financial targets and that their job is safe because of it. And, they, once you're cross-trained in those and you have that interdisciplinary knowledge, then it's pretty easy afterwards.
Oh, we have another question? Yes.
So a lot of the conversation, geothermal is expensive. There's a big upfront cost. Solar is well proven, wind as well. Often I don't hear much talk about waste to energy biomass, and I know it's something either you like it here or you don't. But nevertheless, like in Denmark and many other European countries, this is a huge resource as well. And obviously, I feel there's a lot of misinformation around it as well, that if you burn waste, it will encourage more people to do more waste, but you can also just reuse what is there and then burn the rest. So where does that kind of technology, well proven and easy kind of to install as well, where does this fit in all this? Is this part of the equation at all? Like even on Heidegger?
Yeah, so our northern coordinator earlier this year actually retrofitted his biomass for, I believe it's 3 buildings or possibly 4. Our problem is production of pellets and or chips. Obviously, it changes for each location that you're at. And if you can afford having a mill run constantly to get the stuff from all the loggers that are using all of their stuff, how are you getting it to the plant to then break it up and then ship it to each one? So logistically, it can be a little more challenging. Also, with all those costs, you have to remember in remote communities along these coasts that are away from the mainland, everything is exponentially more expensive as you're doing that. So with biomass, I'm looking at a few plants and possibly utilizing them in the area, but basically it comes down to if we can get clean enough fuel and a plant that can run constantly in order to use those facilities to then power or heat our area.
Hi, thanks for just speaking today. I have a question about politics these days. So as you know, Bill 14 here in BC is the Green Energy Act, where basically the cabinet here and the BC legislature, the BC NDP leadership, they just get to decide what projects get greenlighted. And it sort of, railroads, in my opinion, a lot of what we fought for with the UNDRIP, or the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And then you've got Bill C5 that Ms. May was talking about earlier on. I just wonder, do you folks think that these sort of bills that have the power to sort of override Indigenous sovereignty, do you think that they have the potential to put the kibosh or to like flatten some of these projects that you're working on right now or that others are working on in the field in terms of creating pushback from communities more so than there was even before?
That could be a very, very long conversation. Along with the sovereignty aspect of getting into those bills, obviously we aren't ever going to secede our rights. And for them to put that on us, obviously provincially it doesn't really affect us as much as we are all federal lands. So we can bypass some of the regulations that provincials do. I mean, obviously we do our best. We have to abide by BC Hydro standards, obviously, because they're the ones supplying us the power. But for a lot of those regulations being on federal land, we can change things as we need to based on the federal. So provincially, it doesn't have a major impact on what we need done.
Yeah. There's like, with UNDRIP, we usually see politicians pop up every once in a while that were wanting to erode those Indigenous protections put in place. Even recently, we've had politicians here in BC not wanting that in place and wanting it gone. And I can say that that's a really bad idea. It's bad, you know, probably for them because they would, you know, when there's not the protections there in place for a vulnerable population, you can ram through a project, a bad one. And as, you know, Indigenous out there, you kind of have to hold their nose at those things. And so it's not really a place that we want to be anymore. So you're constantly fighting to keep those guidelines in place. And from my perspective, having those there, it provides you a framework that you already come in knowing how you're going to negotiate. So you're in the best position to expedite it. And when you have not paid attention to them, those as a non-Indigenous executive, I usually just see it as sloppy or laziness, unprofessionalism, because we've in most cases, quite clearly laid out what the guidelines are, what the needs are. And we do need to expedite some of these projects because we do have a national security and economic problem south of us. And Garrett and I often talk about that we you know, as Indigenous, we want the projects, we need the projects. But what that also is that we just also want to be full, you know, we want all the information for it. We don't have to feel like you're getting bad information and it's hidden, just like what I've seen with like geothermal. People want to show up in communities, put a geothermal project in and not talk about fracking or earthquake or some of the risks. And they have all the answers. They just don't want to tell you. And that because they think that, you know, it might cause some social problems. Meanwhile, it's making it much worse. It's breeding distrust. And so at that too, they want to know that they're getting a fair market value for the deal too, because we have decades of that where we're seeing with having to pay back with hydroelectric dams that were not paid at fair market value or just flooded out of your area that you lived forever and, you know, said, too bad, so sad. Here's where we're going to move you into a couple of, you know, equivalent of an ice fishing shack. And now people, once again, they have a lot of good reason out there that's been established over decades to not trust you. And so this is also why it comes down to having good trusted third-party intermediaries, because you can move as fast as you're trusting your third-party intermediaries there that do that are informing everybody, and they've done it, and they can replicate the successes because everybody just, you know, wants a good deal that is going to pollute in their area. It's not like they don't want the projects. And so sometimes that can create animosity, and that's not unique to Canada either. That happens in New Zealand. It happens in Taiwan. It happens in Kenya. So these problems are, you know, usually not unique, and and it comes from you know, a lot of times too, the capacity building that some communities, you just have to approach it as like, nobody knows what you're talking about here. And there's not enough people that are going to understand, and they got elder care. And so we do have to pre-bunk these communities and fund and finance the development and bring people, you know, it's not that people don't want your project or mining project in there, just that they don't trust it. So you should probably start training the engineers within that community, within your own ranks, and then having them come back, and they can come back and do the translation with the community. That this is how it's going to be done safely. Here's what the plans are. Here's where, you know, where we're going to have some accountability. And then without that, I simply, with some people, say I think that if you can't meet those criteria, you're probably unqualified for that job and the position.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. I'm thinking about the tension between Indigenous sovereignty and equity ownership. Like, you know, in the BC power calls that have recently come out, they have mandated this, I think it's minimum 25%, but I think in the 2024 call, there were like 10 projects with 49 or 51%. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on whether that mandate for equity ownership is doing much, right? Is this, I mean, I don't mean doing everything, but I mean in the strive for actual sovereignty and project control and all the kinds of things that you would like to see, is having that built into the clean power call helping the projects you guys are interested in, and also kind of like the communities that you're working with.
I mean, I think that what it's helping out there is meeting the province's commitment to UNDRIP. So automatically, it forces everybody up front to start thinking about we got to go in and consult, because ahead of time, because if we don't get this right, we just don't even have a project. We're going to spin our wheels here forever. And so somebody better go to the community down the road that we're going to be doing the project in close proximity to, and start talking to people, because we're not going to be able to do this project and just push it through like we have, you know, like people have in the past. So in that regard, for that equity side of things helps the province hit its targets there, and then report it back. In the past, usually that Indigenous equity ownership of 51% is kind of the magic threshold, that when you're in control, you get access to better funds out there and resources. And once you're below it, that money kind of gets pulled back and gone away. But it's largely the 51% is in some places it's symbolic. It's a way of pushing you into a majority ownership role, and usually that's there to prevent a developer that, if they had the majority ownership side of things, and we're going to do something culturally offensive to the area, you could stop them from doing that. And so that's typically what I have, typically with non-Indigenous executives, they'll want to come in 50-50 or do something like that, and have to explain to them that this isn't about how you come and think of it from a majority ownership spot, that you have control of it, and that they're going to stop you. They, you know, usually you want your minority equity shareholder to go out there and be the operating partner and do all that. And some companies, power companies out there, like execute that very well, that model, and get the projects that they need. And they are generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and they are doing granted equity out there as well, where, you know, you don't have the money for it, no problem, we'll lend it to you at the terms that we get this job done. And so this is part of some of the excellent engineering and finance design behind it, that you can see that you have the project bankability, that you can do that with those project partners and get the project off the ground. It's a matter of, do you want to be a majority owner shareholder and be right and not make any money, or be on the other side of it and we got cash flow?
Did you have anything to add to that, Garrett, or?
Not at this time. I'd probably have to pull up a couple things on that one. We could talk after about that.
Leighton, you mentioned training your own experts. And I'm just curious how green jobs play play a role in this for the communities that you both work with, in terms of what are the opportunities there, and how are you helping, or how are your initiatives helping out in the development of the workforce of tomorrow that would be needed to not just build the projects, but also operate and maintain them.
Yeah. The probably one of the things that irks me the most when there's problems and I come to a project is where I see the consultants, and in those projects, I'll ask, where's your First Nations, Métis, or Inuit person around here, and shadowing you? Who's going to look after this after you're gone? And usually you see that is a situation where the consulting firm is not sharing a lot of information. It will be hidden in their file systems, and it happens a lot with CEOs of ECDEVs, that they hold on to all the information, and that's where good quality information goes to die. So usually, example of some of our research programs here, we can go to Indigenous Clean Energy and go to Generation Power and get matching or even 75% leverage funds to be able to hire somebody that's 30 and under to shadow us as we go through and do the research, because there's no real point in us coming along and doing the research and doing the project and then not having anybody come out with better skill sets. If that's what's happened, then we have completely failed in these spots. Plus, two, there has to be, in those communities, you want some continuity, that if we just pick up stakes and leave the project, usually what ends up happening, what we have found with previously with 100% Indigenous owned projects, previous to these years with technologies are better and the training has been good with the First Nations, is 90% of them failed. Because once that consulting group left, that OPEX has fallen apart and nobody knew how to maintain anything. And then you get just a solar dust collector out there.
Solar dust collector. That's I've never heard that term before, but I think it's coined here first, I guess.
It'll be my tagline for my new venture there. Prevent solar dust collectors. Yes.
And Garrett, I guess for yourself with your projects, developing a workforce for the CapEx, but also for the OpEx, how?
Yeah, so when we end up starting our projects, we always state to the contractors and everyone that's involved that at the very beginning, we're going to hire an amount of people, whether it be 1 through 10, to then come in and learn underneath them during the whole project, from the beginning of the installation to the maintenance side of it, and the continual maintenance, usually 2 or 3 years after, for them to be trained. And we try to keep that local workforce as busy as we possibly can. I myself have attended every single course that I can for learning about these projects that we're doing, just so that we can have some follow-up in the years to come and understanding how all the systems operate and work. And then we push for continual training based on every trip that they come up to do their general maintenance, or we have an issue. Our workers will go in and continue to train with them. And I know that's common along the coast. Not every nation does it, but I know quite a few go through that route to make sure that people in the community benefit. There is knowledge that's passed on. And usually, like with my hiring, I can bring those in. I can sign off on their hours if they want to go after something. So all of our people that did our solar this past year, we can sign up on all their hours and then put that towards a trade school if they would like. And then that can further educate them and choose their path if they want to get more serious about going into those fields.
Sorry, I just have a follow-up question. How do you select the people who come and work for you? Is there like an application process? Do you reach out to the community and say who's interested in this? How do you find those people, and how do you choose who gets the opportunity?
For us, we have to do a public call out. It stipulates that we're going to choose Haida people first, but it's open to the island residents. So if we cannot fulfill the positions within our nation, it is passed on to anyone on island. And after that, we open it up to anyone that would like to work. And then we do our selection past that point based on previous experiences, their dedication to the type of work that we're looking at, if it's going to be a peak interest, if they want to pursue education in it, and then we'll make our selection at that point.
Yeah. Usually we prefer somebody, you know, in community first, because you're also looking for somebody that's got that cultural awareness and that that knowledge that uniquely they can navigate that spot. Given that, there are, say with Indigenous clean energy, power generation, if you got money in your budget and you can't find anybody, they have a wait list of qualified candidates already there waiting for somebody to take them on a project and give them some work to do and some experience. So, because typically sometimes in the communities we do have the problems where we can't, you know, it just is a matter of everybody does have a job or they're moved off to the city and they're living away from there. And so there are communities out there that can't find anybody. And so in those cases, yeah, there's wait lists with some of the other ones, and they're waiting in queue.
I guess with that, I'm just also curious in knowing, is there anything else significant that for your projects that you'd like to mention? The good, the bad, the ugly, kind of.
We'll
No?
be here all night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pick your top three.
Good.
Figure this out.
I guess with the good, over say with like the ultra deep geothermal side is it seems to be really kicking off in a big way. So it does look like we're going to be getting subsurface energy systems in a lot of global spots, and we're going to be able to diversify from what we call like geological Goldilocks zones, where they do have the plates in the heating system that just geologically everything is lined up perfect, and you can do very cheaply geothermal in that spot. But now we're looking to drill deeper. The bad part is it's like literally going to the moon. We're basically doing an Earth shot, and so we don't know how to do that. And then the ugly part of it is it's going to take a lot of money and throwing it at, and you know, we're going to be making some expensive holes in the ground, much like how, you know, space research went. They put money into it, but we also got a lot of great things out of it. You know, there was solar development and power tools, and so on the way we get a lot of great spin-offs.
All right.
Tell us where all your great fishing spots are, Grant.
Nobody will get those. I find it great that we can find all of our funding usually for our workers within a big criteria, but I know for sure there's one major holdback for the First Nations communities. The stipulation of under 35 workers in the workforce being almost in every position is a little bit harder to fulfill in our communities, as most of the people that are around are usually about mid-30s, and they're just about to age out of those programs. So when we go to hire somebody, we have to keep that in mind, so that when they hit that 35, we have no funding to keep them in the workforce. As nations move forward with this, a lot of people don't move back until they're in their 30s. And with that, what workforce are we left to have? I mean, we're hiring people that are usually younger. I mean, yes, we want to create a long-lasting workforce, but for us, it's not always the best. And to push that agenda forward so that we can open it up and have a person that can stick around and work and have a little better understanding of how this business is operated. So one of the biggest holdbacks with the funding, I would have to say, is change the age range so that we can start including an older workforce that has a background in different areas.
Yeah, we're finding that like even with entrepreneur supports that usually funding can stop at that 35, 40 mark. And a lot of First Nations people will get their start later on in life. Because we do see people coming back after having families or moving around careers and, you know, kind of things take, you know, they reach their balance in life sometimes around their mid 30s, and then they've got everything into place, and then there's no wraparound supports to get you going and propel you. And so what you end up getting is a disassociated person. And if it is broadly systemic, you just, it starts going through the community and through the entire workforce. There's nothing there for you. So you end up with bad stuff.
Great. Carol, you have a question?
It just came through my mind a bit while you were presenting. I don't know much about deep drilling or like how much you need to kind of like extract from the ground or how invasive it is. I was just curious more like, let's say, discourse-wise, how do you adapt or frame how you present that to also distance yourself from, say, the extractive label that some people, some groups could see in that, because it's still about, you know, going in the ground. So yeah, how do you make this? Because it's still like, you know, you call it drilling, and
Yeah.
so for some people it could
There's
be
the optics.
yeah, the
of it,
triggering. So
and yeah, and
how you
I-
present that?
yeah, I think that people are a little bit more passive that we're going to be extracting the heat. What we've actually found through some of the social science is that people in communities aren't comfortable with it because they can't see it. And so we started to kind of work away from that, include into my colleagues that, you know, when we roll in, and maybe PowerPoints for our side of the things haven't been the best for explanations, especially with how geoscientists and engineers can explain everything from that standpoint. So even within ASET now entertaining, working on, you know, short videos where it can explain how, or, you know, what it requires for a drilling rig, what is the land base size. A big thing is groundwater protection. That's typically what people are always worried about. You're going to go through and you're going to frack everything and you're going to fry all of our groundwater in there. So we can tell you exactly what the casing is going to look like and how we put engineering in to be able to protect those zones from having that gas communication with them and polluting those groundwater aquifers. And so from beyond that, then we can have better visual tools where you'd be able to see exactly how we're drilling, cementing, and the series of things that go on in short videos. But for right now, everybody's just kind of pumped out their super technical stuff and hope that you've just enjoyed their presentation, which I've always, you know, sometimes tell my colleagues, like, unless it's just a room of geologists or geophysicists in there, nobody's really enjoying that delivery and the grilling and how you're going about that presentation. So this thing needs to change. Hence why we have started to pull in social scientists and our political scientists into our technical ultra deep drilling programs to shed a bit of light on that and how we're communicating that. So yeah.
I guess with that, there's only about 10 minutes left for, according to the schedule, we're to go. Are there any other questions from the crowd to for our two panelists?
So on the geothermal, I'm curious. So I get from your explanation that you haven't realized a project yet. How far are you from one where you say, well, this is going to be likely to happen in XYZ month? Or is that difficult to say?
The hang up right now is that everything is in experimental mode. So there are some companies out there marching around with some pretty heavy public funds currently that will probably be drilling by 2026. And Alberta also has mobilized $50 million towards a drilling accelerator. And so they'll be probably also doing a site selection and drilling by 2026 as well, and starting to motion some of the recommendations that we're actively providing them with currently. We're already talking with the government about it, how to go about designing these drilling test sites. And so you'll probably see by 2026 more of them. There are some like active drill sites south of us in the border at Forge and Fervo, where we've economically produced experiments and know that we can replicate them in what we call like pretty rich thermal gradient zones, where we can get to the heat shallower and there's not so much drilling cost in there. And then we can, in those spots there also, we'll frack it and create artificial reservoirs in those areas where we don't have the permeability for all of the water to go through whatever working fluid that we have down there. So you're going to start seeing them pretty recently. Even in Europe, you have Ever with Germany there that's drilled its spot, but that's also been pretty opaque on what the details are around what the yields and also what the ultimate investment is going to be by the public.
Yeah, because I do seem to recall that there's like several geothermal like sites in Germany that are operational for the last couple of years. So I'm struggling to understand whether it's like the specific geographics here that make it more challenging for you because you have to go deeper, or if is it the lack of customers in the region, so to say, that makes it too much of an expense for too little off-takers, or like what's the holdback there?
The holdback is that some of what we want to do induces seismicity. And so if we're going to just go after heat, we have to put it by buildings where people can buy it. Because and we've tried to circle the square on this and look at it any other way and, move the plant out. And we have to like take that fluid and pump it into town. And then we got to get it back somehow. And then we get a parasitic pump load in there. So we'll be telling you that we can do 10 megawatts, but a lot of times you get like, 5 megawatts worth of pump load just to pump that back, and it's not going to work. Now, what you also get is induced seismicity, is as things cool in the area, or if you are pushing fluid into there, it can hit fracture zones and you can get an earthquake, usually not very big. Everybody should just, say what they are and where the fracture zones are and some of the unknowns. And it's, approximately how big these tremors are. Usually you need very sensitive scientific equipment to be able to detect that they're even there. But people should talk in terms of probabilities of it happening, because there's a lot of successful projects out there. So yeah, that would be in terms of just the heating. But the electrification side, much more difficult, because we have to go pretty deep, and it's one of the things where like we're drilling stuff and we're throwing some money at it, and just like with solar panels, you're going to be looking at the Swanson's curve. It'll be like something different that we'll be looking at for drilling, and then we'll move down those cost efficiencies of and then we'll eventually probably just like how that Swanson's law moves down, bottom out, and then we'll have a viable electrification of geothermal anywhere.
Yeah, I'm going to take you back to Saskatchewan, Leighton.
Yeah, I love it there. God's country.
God's country.
Yeah.
So just a comment. Recently, I was listening to city councilors in Regina, and they're talking about a project they're building. And one councilor said, this geothermal thing, is that a real thing? Like, I don't think that's really, been shown to be viable. And so there's communication and education issues there. So that's just a comment.
Yes.
Okay? Just want to, But the other thing is that it was mentioned right off the get-go this morning that there might be some potential, and not necessarily a parallel for Haida Gwaii, but elsewhere where there's been oil and gas drilling, and now there's all these wells that have been abandoned and so forth. So what is the potential in your estimation to be able to draw the geothermal from these old abandoned wells? Is it a potential or a possibility? I'm totally ignorant on that, I must admit.
Yeah, we have a lot of smart people working on some of the thermal modeling. What ends up happening when you acquire one of those sites is that you become liable for it, and usually it's like the liability. And a lot of these like oil and gas sites are like it's one thing I always hated about oil and gas is traveling all around the world as a driller. You don't get to go to the nice spots of the world, so they're usually located in the middle of no man's land without any civilization around. And so the proximity to pull that heat and or like when we look at costing to put transmission lines into there starts to be cost prohibitive. But when you start to acquire those old wells, you incur the liability from them. And we don't know if some of the previous engineers and drill crews of the 90s and early 2000s were pretty wild back in the day. So this is why you have those leaking wells, is you can have poor cement jobs that when we basically run casing down in the ground, which is once we make the hole, we basically run a straw and then pump up cement on the outside. And in the past, either that chemistry in the cement hasn't been good, or that oil and gas company has been in a rush and done a rush job, and it's just about the money at that point and hitting those targets. And so we'll get gas migration in there. And this is why this is why GHG, systems like GHG-SAT are out there that do flyovers, and we can see all these wells leaking. But thankfully, that's technology is out there, and we can see that they're leaking, and we know how to go down, drill it, perf, squeeze, cap, cut, all of the other ways to go out there about remediating that. But if we acquire one of those things as a liability, because we make so little, like we know that the payback periods on that heat and the electrification of geothermal are so long, we end up going bankrupt. If one of these wells is leaking, then we have to do the remediation on it and do the cleanup and all of that. So, but there are some oil and gas wells out there that people will lend you. But the problem also too becomes geothermal out there is a function of heat and flow. And so usually what ends up happening with these oil and gas wells is they're drilled too small and they don't have a big enough hole size because we need to move a lot of fluid uphole to our power stations. And so if in like shale gas, if we've daisy chained them together and can get the fluid flows out of them, that's maybe doable, but a lot of them are spaced out too far, and we're on for sure the infrastructure. So a lot of times it actually works out that we're just better to drill new holes and budget for that rather than assume the liability. And then there might not be, and some of these oil and gas wells also are unless you're California or some spots in Texas where you can drill beside a school, and or you got the pump jack beside the gas station, and the drilling rig is disguised as a building. Most of our infrastructure is a long ways away from any of those places that it's actually usable to us.
There's one person on, maybe super quick. We can do a twofer because Niels has a question and then kind of close. Okay, so there's Rebby online asked, I was wondering if you could reflect on the UNDRIP in terms of applying these mandates to restore trust and equity ownership with Indigenous energy projects across BC and other northern provinces, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Yukon. Thanks. And then Niels, maybe you have a related question, but we'll see how this lands. Yeah, and then we can.
More like a comment a little bit. So because just really quick, in Denmark, there's been a big push until electrification with the large-scale heat pumps, but now the next push is actually geothermal. So that's going to be a huge new next transition away from biomass is one of the things. But to your point, they will be actually drilled and located in the middle of the city there. So that is definitely doable because they have a small footprint as well. So I'm just happy to connect with some of the companies that do that to maybe share some knowledge on how that can be done.
Yeah, usually those ones are landed at a depth and in a formation that doesn't have hydrocarbons in it. If that's the case, then that's geologically pretty safe. So with some of the ones retrofitting those oil and gas wells, not only are they located at the depths that are just too shallow or not at the right spot, but they also got they're not, we're finding some of these wells as they're not, when we retrofit them, they're not entirely depleted. And in other places, you can have things like H2S gas. It's poisonous to you. It'll kill you. It's also, when we talk about hydrogen, we get metal embrittlement. It erodes everything. It's a nasty substance to work with. And so, but in those cases that you're talking about, yeah, it's an underground radiator. It's pretty simple. And we're coming up with some new technologies out there to be able to connect those wells subsurface, very deep, using artificial magnetic fields, and then homing in and being able to connect, we're able to connect wells the size of basketballs, like 2-3 kilometers underneath the ground, and after drilling a long ways. So
this is for heating also only. So they drill down to 2 or 3 kilometers to get that 80-degree C.
Yes.
Water.
Yeah. And then UNDRIP. Is that what? Yeah. All right. Yeah. Can you just repeat that, the UNDRIP question?
The question was asking if you can reflect on UNDRIP in terms of applying these mandates to restore trust and equity with Indigenous energy projects across BC and other northern provinces, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Yukon.
Yeah, I think BC is actually doing a pretty good job. Like, they should give themselves a pat on the back. They've put it into play, and progress over perfection is the way to go. And so they actually just, even if it's a step in the wrong direction, it's still a step because you don't see other provinces doing it. Yeah. So the fact that there's just even a system here is a big win. So that's why even like being, on the Métis side and some stuff, like even with, I'm not super critical when somebody's gone out there and done something. I'd be very realistic about, that progress over perfection, and that it's not going to be perfect for a while, and that they are having accountability in their reports. And so, and then also be conscientious not to grind them, because, we're not perfect on our side, on our Indigenous dealings and that, and neither is the counterpart across the table. And so, like I said, having realistic expectations that not everything is going to go well and be instantly click together, I think is, a good spot to be that. And that's, with my Indigenous mentorship and good business professionals out there dealing with, they usually will almost always share that take and that attitude in their approach. It's usually a very positive one at first.
Yeah, for UNDRIP, for me, I agree with it. I've been in quite a few debates, especially with my colleagues, about how it is, and there's some of a consensus that I've talked with that it's more CANDRIP than UNDRIP. So there's a little bit of debate in there, but I believe they're doing it for the better. I mean, we're seeing these projects starting to take off in our communities. And I know for our nation, we're going 100% ownership of all of these as we're moving forward, and we're utilizing some of that UNDRIP consultation in that to help us achieve what we're wanting, and being completely self-sustained, hopefully in the near future here. I believe UNDRIP is in the right place, and we just got to start utilizing it better and stop the divide of these people calling it down. Obviously, it's a learning curve. It's run by a government, so there's always going to be some hiccups. So I think it's going in the right direction. Of course, we're still working on it. So I have nothing really bad to say about UNDRIP at this time.
Yeah. Great. Well, Leighton, Garrett, thank you so much for sharing this talk with me. I very much appreciate the time that we've been able to spend together. And I wish you both much luck and much success in your future endeavors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.